We are conditioned to believe that archaeology is a safe science. We think of it as a gentle study of the past, a discipline of dust, brushes, broken pottery, and museums. We trust that the timeline of human history is a finished puzzle, framed and hanging on the wall of academia. We are told that we went from caves to from huts to stone cities, and from stone cities to skyscrapers in a straight, unbroken line of progress. But in the last decade, archaeology has quietly transformed into something else entirely. It has become a battlefield. It is no longer about finding what we expect to find. It is about confronting things that simply should not be there. This is not the history you see on the evening news. These are not the discoveries that get published in standard textbooks. These are the findings that appear in headlines for 24 hours and then vanish. They are removed from public databases. They are locked away in the storage basements of great institutions. They are the data points that shatter the comfortable model of our reality. Today, we are not going to talk about the discoveries that made the history books. We are going to talk about the ones that had to be erased. Modern archaeology has a fundamental problem. It operates on a system of confirmation bias. It does not seek the truth, it seeks validation. When a funding grant is issued, when a dig is authorized, there is an implicit contract. Find something that fits. Find something that confirms the timeline. Do not find something that breaks the machine. If an artifact supports the accepted narrative, it is celebrated. It is placed in a glass case. But if an object defies the narrative, if it appears in a geological layer where humans supposedly didn't exist, or if it shows technology that shouldn't have been invented for another 5,000 years, it is not celebrated, it is attacked. It is labeled with the specific vocabulary of dismissal. They call it an anomaly. They call it a dating error. They call it a natural formation that just happens to look like engineering. And if those labels don't stick, they use the ultimate weapon: silence. The object is removed from the table. The report is buried. The question is never asked again. But the Earth is getting tired of keeping secrets, and there are three specific categories of finds that are currently breaking the logic of history. First, let us look at the structures that are older than civilization itself. In the highlands of Turkey, in the deserts of the Middle East, and in the jungles of South America, we are finding megalithic complexes that defy the laws of social evolution. According to the official timeline, 10,000 years ago, humans were scattered bands of hunter-gatherers. We had no agriculture. We had no metal tools. We had no concept of mathematics or writing. We were surviving, not building. Yet we find sites constructed with massive limestone pillars weighing up to 50 tons. These sites are not random piles of rocks. They are perfectly oriented to the constellations as they appeared 12,000 years ago. They possess complex geometry. They required a workforce of hundreds, perhaps thousands, working in unison for decades. They required logistics, planning, food supply chains, and architectural blueprints. How does a primitive tribe that hasn't even invented the wheel organize a massive construction project? Who were the engineers? And more importantly, why build a complex facility before you have even built a village? The official story says these are temples built by cavemen, but the engineering suggests they are the remnants of a culture that was already fully developed, fully mature, and possessing capabilities we have forgotten. Then there is the second problem: the technology without a base. This is perhaps the most disturbing aspect of the forbidden archaeology. When you look at the stone vases of pre-dynastic Egypt or the polygonal walls of Peru, you are seeing evidence of machining. We are told these were made with copper chisels and stone hammers, but copper is a soft metal. It cannot cut granite, it cannot cut diorite, it cannot cut basalt. Trying to cut granite with copper is like trying to cut steel with a wooden spoon. Yet we see boreholes with feed rates that imply high-speed drilling. We see interior corners in stone boxes that are perfectly sharp, impossible to achieve with hand grinding. We see symmetry in statues that is precise to within a fraction of a millimeter, something we can only achieve today with computer-aided manufacturing. The official response is always the same. We do not fully understand their methods, but they must have had a lot of time. Time does not turn a soft metal into a hard one. Time does not grant the ability to measure microscopic tolerances with the naked eye. These are not the marks of primitive persistence. These are the signatures of a lost industrial capability. It implies that the history of technology is not a ladder we are climbing for the first time. It is a ladder that someone else climbed before us and then kicked away. And finally, the third category, the things that are simply out of time, the glitches in the matrix of history. We find iron hammers encased in rock that is supposed to be millions of years old. We find footprints of anatomically modern humans in strata that belong to the dinosaurs. We find maps that show the coastline of Antarctica without ice, maps that were drawn centuries before we officially discovered the continent. Each of these objects is a crisis. If just one of them is real, the entire textbook is wrong. If humans existed, or if a high intelligence existed millions of years ago, or even hundreds of thousands of years ago, then we are not the apex of evolution. We are the survivors of a cycle. This leads us to the terrifying conclusion. When you assemble these anomalies, the impossible architecture, the inexplicable machining, the out-of-place artifacts, a dangerous picture emerges. What if human history is not linear? What if it is cyclical? We assume that civilization is a one-way street. We start with fire, we end with space travel. But the evidence suggests that the road has been washed out many times. Civilizations rise. They reach a peak of technology and complexity. They build their towers and their networks, and then something happens. A cataclysm, a solar flare, a comet impact, a sudden shift in the climate. The system crashes, the knowledge is lost, the machines rust and return to the earth. The survivors retreat to the caves and the mountains. They forget the science, but they remember the myths. They remember the gods who could fly and cut stone with light. And then, slowly, over thousands of years, they start again. We are not the first version of this world. We are version 5.0, or maybe version 10.0. We are living on the graveyard of the previous attempts. We are building our cities on top of their ruins, using their stones for our foundations, unaware of what lies beneath the concrete. This is why they don't talk about these findings. This is why the archaeological establishment fights so hard to maintain the status quo. Because admitting the truth requires more than just rewriting the history books. It requires a fundamental shift in our psychological place in the universe. To admit that civilizations have vanished before is to admit that our civilization can vanish too. It means we are not special. We are not immune. We are fragile. We look at our skyscrapers, our internet, our planes, and we think we have conquered nature. But the builders of the megaliths probably thought the same thing. The engineers who drilled the granite probably thought their empire would last forever. And now, all that remains of them are anomalies, unexplainable rocks that we stare at in confusion. Archaeology in its current form is trying to protect us from this realization. It tries to smooth over the gaps, to glue the pieces together into a picture that makes us feel safe. It wants to tell us a story of endless progress. But the ground beneath our feet is telling a different story. It is a story of catastrophic resets. It is a story of forgotten epics. Every year, diggers and scanners find more pieces of the puzzle. Most of them are ignored, but the sheer volume of evidence is reaching a breaking point. The dam is cracking. We can only look away for so long. So the next time you hear about a mysterious discovery that disappears from the news cycle after a day, do not assume it was a mistake. Do not assume it was a hoax. Assume that it was something too real to be allowed to remain. Because sometimes the past isn't just old. Sometimes it is too advanced to be convenient. Sometimes the artifacts we dig up are not greeting cards from our ancestors. They are warning signs. They are the flight recorders of a crashed plane, waiting for us to decode the data before we make the exact same mistake. Archaeology should not be a search for who we were. It should be a desperate investigation into what we might cease to be. The clock is ticking, and the Earth is patient. It has buried better civilizations than ours, and it is waiting to see if we will learn the lesson, or if we will just become the next layer of anomalous data for the future to find.